Okay, good morning. Thanks for coming in. We have a group from a wide variety of places. I actually got an email last night from someone from Australia who signed up for this event and wanted to know if we were recording it because it would be 1:30 in the morning. So it's not just Illinois here, there's people from multiple states, but we are very excited that you could join us today. I have a couple slides, just some housekeeping to go over before we get started. So you are all muted now. We ask that you keep yourself muted, if that's possible, during the conversation and during the presentation. If you have questions, and we'll have time for questions at the end, please use the chat feature. I will be asking all the questions that come in at the end of the event. If we don't get to your question, we'll make sure it gets answered. So please do that. Now, without further ado, we're going to start with our event sponsor, and that is BioMarin. Our speaker is Michelle Mingay. She has been our local BioMarin rep for, man, as long as I've been on the board, for at least 8 years. She does an incredible job, and she's going to give us a little update on what's going on in the BioMarin world, and we really thank her and BioMarin for sponsoring this event today. So, Michelle, are you ready? I think you're muted. You are muted, Michelle. All right. She is ready. She can't unmute herself, so I will get to that right now. Michelle?
Can everyone hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you. Sorry, Grant, about that. For some reason, it was saying I couldn't unmute myself.
That's odd.
Yeah, don't know. But anyways, I'm unmuted now. So yeah, thank you for that introduction, Grant. Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with all of you all and to have this great opportunity to sponsor this event so that you all have an opportunity to hear Sarah's story. And it feels like it's been a while since we've all been together. So it feels good, even though, you know, we're in a Zoom room, it still feels good to be in the same room as all of you all, even if it is virtually. So for those of you who don't know me, as Grant said, my name is Michelle Mingay. I work for BioMarin here in Illinois, and like Grant said, it's been for quite some time now. So we may have met or connected at various events over the years, or perhaps maybe you know or have worked with one of my colleagues in the past, either Jennifer or Allison, one of our clinical coordinators. But before kind of getting into more about BioMarin, I just wanted to give a big thank you and shout out to the organization here for bringing us all together and for being so flexible and innovative with these events that they have coming up, obviously today, and then the events that they have scheduled for the future. And I think it's so great that they're recognizing that even though, again, we can't all be in the same room together, we can still be in the same Zoom room together, and how important that is to kind of keep supporting each other during this time. So a big thank you to the PKU Organization of Illinois for continuing to stay innovative. I think it's fantastic. So to shift gears a little bit and let you know kind of some of the things about how BioMarin can help support you. So for those of you who aren't familiar, we have 2 different medication options for those of you with PKU that are listening to potentially help lower your Phe levels. So we have Kuvan, which is available for all ages and is a tablet or a powder. And then we also have Palynziq, which is available for those of you 18 and older and is an injection. So both Kuvan and Palynziq work very differently from each other and come with different requirements. And they both have kind of their own set of potential side effects. So if you have any questions or you'd like to kind of chat more about either Palynziq for those of you 18 and older, or for Kuvan, please let me know. Grant, if it's okay with you, could I pop my contact information into the chat box?
Sure, go right ahead.
Okay, I'll do that kind of once I finish chatting here, but that way then If you have any questions, you can feel free to, I'll put my email and my cell phone in there to either email me, call me, or text me, and happy to chat about any questions that you might have about either Kuvan or Palynziq. Couple of other things going on. So we are still doing some of our smaller virtual events. Maybe you've attended one of our pantry tables in the past. We're doing those virtually now over Zoom, and also some just kind of smaller group meetups. So if you're interested in attending those, or you just want to make sure that you're getting invited to those, same thing, you know, feel free to reach out to me and let me know that you're interested, and we'll make sure as those events kind of come up that you're getting invited to those. So finally, really, I just hope you all enjoy today's session with Sarah, and that I think most importantly of everything is that you and your loved ones are staying safe and healthy. And thank you all so much for being here, and so happy to see you in a virtual setting. So I will turn it back over to Grant.
Thank you, Michelle, very much. Much appreciated. So let's get on now to the main event, Life Lessons from Living with PKU. And I want to spend just a minute talking about Sarah, if everyone can hear me. Sarah Hope Marshall is a speaker and organizational consultant. She speaks extensively on diversity, social impact, and organizational culture, working with businesses to help them integrate diversity efforts and social impact into their business models. Sarah brings perspective as a person living with PKU, a rare metabolic disease, to her work. She brings a vast professional background and almost 2 decades in various forms of community development. She earned an MBA in 2010 with a self-designed concentration in community development. She has worked in direct service, faith-based organizations, community organizing, and social enterprise before becoming involved in economic empowerment work in 2012 when she began working in the credit union industry. As a credit union employee, she assumed an increasing responsibility until she took over as CEO of a CDFI credit union that focused on serving the financial needs of those experiencing a financial crisis or poverty. During her tenure, she regularly participated in consumer advocacy work and served as an advisory committee for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, federal agency. Sarah wrote regularly for an online industry publication and won leadership awards for her service to small credit unions. Sarah has spoken around the country to rare disease patients about advocacy and efforts, and has been featured in rare disease patient videos from medical providers. She is on the Speakers Bureau for BioMarin Pharmaceutical and has spoken around the country at credit union events. Sarah is currently working on her second master's degree at the University of Chicago. So Sarah, the floor is now yours. I'm going to unmute you and unshare my screen, and I will allow you to share.
Sounds good. Let me just grab my slides. A moment here. Okay, can everybody see my slides okay? Can you just put a comment in the chat box if you can see those?
I can see them.
All right, perfect. I am very excited to be here today. I want to thank the PKU Organization of Illinois and BioMarin for co-sponsoring this event and allowing me to come in as a speaker. I'm really excited about this topic in particular because I have not heard a whole lot about how PKU can benefit us for the long term over the course of my life. And so I felt like this was really important information to share with people with PKU. And I want to start off by acknowledging that there are all kinds of different age groups and life experiences in this chat. We're all coming from different places. And I talked to some of you who signed up before the event. So I know that there are probably some adults with PKU on this call. There may be some parents of children with PKU. You may be in a place where PKU is really hard and you don't feel like there's a lot of good out of it, but I hope by the end of this that I can help provide you with a different perspective. You may also be somebody who has really great control of diet management and will totally resonate with everything that I'm saying, and wherever you're coming from is okay. PKU is a medical condition, and we all have different levels of challenges in terms of dealing with it. So if you can, just go ahead and drop in the chat where you're from so that we can see what parts of the country, and I guess Grant said somebody from Australia was hoping to listen to this. Just let us know where you're from, and then if you are comfortable, just drop in the chat who in your household has PKU and their age, just so we can see the range of experiences on this call. The biggest thing that I hope that you take away from all of this is the idea that even though PKU is a challenge, it's not a limitation. Having PKU does require some extra work and requires you to think differently than most people about life, about the way that you eat, about the way that you approach things, but it does not limit your potential to be successful in anything that you do. So we're going to cover a couple things today. We're going to talk about PKU and mindset. We're going to talk about 5 skills that PKU teaches that set the stage for success. Then we'll talk about a couple attitudes to adopt. And when we're done with that, we'll leave some time at the end for question and answer. And I will turn on my video for the Q&A, just so that it's a little bit more personal. And we could talk about some of the challenges that you're having with diet or some of the things that are working for you. I hope this is an opportunity to feel like you can connect with other people with PKU. It's really rare in normal life when we're not in quarantine and not in COVID to connect with other people who understand your experiences. And even though we moved into a virtual world, we can still do that here. Feel free to talk with each other during the chat. Grant will be monitoring the chat. And so Grant, if there is something that comes up that you feel like is really important in the moment, feel free to interject. Otherwise, we'll hold off on that until the end. But use the chat liberally. Just enjoy the presentation. And I hope that there is something that you can take away from this. So what we're going to talk about is how PKU helps develop some common skills that help you be successful in anything that you do in life. And Grant read my bio, but I wanted to tell you a little bit more about myself personally. I am 41 years old and I have classical PKU. And I have been on pretty much any type of treatment that's been available. I was on diet. I was treated at a very young age. There was a period of time in my life that I did go off diet, and it was not a great period of time. Everybody experiences hyphae symptoms differently, but for me, it was a very dark time. I experienced a lot of depression. I really struggled with school and concentration, and it did not go well for me. And so that period of my life really impressed on me the need to continue to manage my PKU. That period of time was about 2 to 3 years of my life in my teens, and from then on, I stayed on diet, but that doesn't mean that I didn't struggle with it. I had periods of my life where my Phe levels were high. They weren't always in control the way that I would like. In my early 30s, I went on Kuvan. That was a big benefit for me. It did help to stabilize my levels, but it didn't quite allow me to modify my diet. So I still stayed on about 7 grams of protein, even when I was on Kuvan. I'm currently on Palynziq right now and eating a completely normal diet. And when we do get to the Q&A at the end, I won't specifically be spending a lot of time on answering questions about treatment options, because that is something that you do need to discuss with your clinic and make those decisions with your medical team. You can reach out to BioMarin rep in your area if you have questions about either of those treatments. I can speak briefly about some of my experiences with the different treatments, but that won't be the main focus of the Q&A. In terms of my professional background, though, I have experienced quite a bit of success that people without PKU work to achieve. As Grant mentioned, I served as CEO as a small financial institution for a number of years. I've worked as an adjunct professor. I've served on a federal government advisory committee. I've spoken across the country. As mentioned, I do some BioMarin events. So if you come to a BioMarin event, you may hear me speak about my story and how I transitioned to Palynziq. I have been published in my industry. I had an article that I wrote mentioned in the Wall Street Journal, and I have an MBA. I'm working on my second master's degree, and that degree is at the University of Chicago. And the reason that I want to mention that as important is because it's a highly ranked school, and I don't say that to brag. I say that because there was a period of time in my life where I thought PKU was going to limit me from ever being in a place like that. I didn't think that with all the struggles that I had with concentration and focus, that I was ever going to be able to go to a school that rigorous and that challenging. And that turned out to not be true either. PKU was not a limitation in any area of my life. It took some work, but it was not a limitation. So I hope by the end, you come away understanding some of the skills that PKU can teach that help you be successful. And the reason I say that is because I don't think PKU limited me. I think it taught me some skills that I've seen over and over again help people be successful. There are some things about diet management, and there are things about treatment management that are really critical for just being a successful person in life. And being 41 years old, I did not have a lot of role models for what success looked like with PKU. Most of my peers were taken off diet for a long period of time at some point. So I'm really excited about how far treatment has come and how much possibility there is for people growing up with PKU now. But I do want to remind everybody that people in their 40s and 50s who have PKU did not have the advantages of all the treatment that is available now. And doctors were still learning and experimenting on us. So I hope that now kids growing up and teenagers and even people in their 20s and 30s who have PKU can see an example of how you can still be completely successful with PKU. So I want to suggest a couple of things. The first is that PKU makes a person a couple of things, and these aren't the skills I'm going to talk about, but it makes people resilient, persistent, self-aware, sensitive to others, stronger, and health conscious. And what else? And if you think of something else, feel free to drop it in the chat. And again, it's important to acknowledge that people have different experiences here. I gave this presentation once to 2 different age groups of people with PKU, and the group that was closer to my age who'd gone off diet and been taken off diet for a while did have some more struggles seeing what the benefits of PKU were, because also, 20 years ago, veganism and vegetarianism were not common. You could not go to the store and buy coconut milk yogurt and dairy-free cheese, and you couldn't go to a restaurant and get accommodations like you're able to now. So a lot of things have changed. And so there are moments and days that it can be hard to see the benefits of PKU. But when I gave the same presentation to a group of teenagers with PKU, they resonated with a lot of this. So I think that says a lot about treatment, about where we've come as a community, about where we've come in our advocacy efforts, that there's a lot of possibility to see PKU in a positive light and not just a negative light. So if you think of anything of ways that PKU has made you a stronger person, feel free to drop it in the chat. And if something comes up as I'm talking that comes to your mind, go ahead and just mention it whenever it comes to you. One of my favorite books is called Scarcity, Why Having Too Much Means So Little. And that's a book that I actually read for my work in industry because it's about solutions to solving poverty. But what the book talks about is how people, when they're struggling with concerns about money, that absorbs their focus, and all that they can see is the stress. All they can see is what they lack. And they become so consumed with that, they don't always think rationally. But that resonated with me in thinking about PKU, because sometimes it is easy to focus on what we can't have, or the things that we have to do, or the extra work that things take, that we don't always focus on the benefits. And when we only focus on the things that aren't working or the things that aren't going well, we forget the big picture, and we forget all the ways that we're developing things and learning things that are unique, that give us a unique and powerful story about how we've experienced life and the things that we've managed to get through in dealing with this medical condition that can be difficult at times. So the first thing I want to suggest is that PKU makes people very disciplined. And I imagine that this one is one that's really easy to connect with. If you have PKU, you have a really good understanding of the importance of routines and systems. You probably have a routine for making your formula. You may have a meal prep day. You may have a specific day of the week that you draw your blood. You understand how to think in systems, and you understand how to think about routines. And any skill requires discipline to develop it. And that's something that people with PKU learn from a very young age. So for example, being good at a sport, finishing a degree, writing a book, learning any new skill, learning to play a musical instrument, something I'm not personally very good at, but there are a lot of talented people with PKU who are good at music and dance. All of those things require discipline. And with PKU, you're taught that from a very young age. Dietary management reinforces the importance of making choices toward an objective. So anytime we say no to a food, or anytime we say no to something that is not good for us because it will make our Phe levels go up, we're making a choice for a long-term goal. We're saying that our health is more important than the immediate thing that's right in front of us. And that reinforces the skill of discipline. We understand that there's a desired outcome, and we understand the steps that we need to take in order to get to that outcome. And that translates to other areas of life as well. The second skill that PKU develops is resilience and perseverance. When I talk about this one, I like to share a story about a job that I had when I was in college. When I was 21, I worked at a residential treatment center for kids with behavior problems. And if you've been in that type of environment before, you know that it's a really tough job. You're dealing with kids who are traumatized, who sometimes reflect that abuse back out onto the world. And a couple weeks into the job, I was just really frustrated and discouraged because I felt like I was never going to be able to get a handle on keeping the kids feeling safe and keeping the house calm. And I had a boss who sat down with me, and what he said to me is that, he said, Sarah, time and time again, I've seen employees come and go from this job. This is a really difficult job. And a lot of people quit early on because it's so hard. But he said, those that don't quit when it is hard, always going on to do bigger and better things. And then he said, I've seen a lot of people quit because they couldn't handle the pressure. And when they leave, they always struggle to get the next job. And sometimes they come back because they can't stick with another job. They give up too fast. And he said, this job will build something that will help you for life when you stick with this. And as I became an employer and had employees working under me, I've also saw this to be true in those people. And so when he told me that, when he sat down with me and told me that story to encourage me to stick with this job that was really hard, I internalized that message. I was able to process it, but I really learned that through living with PKU. Because the whole thing about PKU is that it does not have an option for quitting. So it teaches people with PKU the skill of getting back up again when things are hard. And what's interesting about that is it's even harder for us when we have high Phe levels, because we've got some of those symptoms going on in our brain that makes it even more difficult to start over again. But we do it with PKU, we do it over and over again because that is the lifestyle of the PKU diet. And I understand that there are different treatment options and people have more flexibility. But I will say that even being on Palynziq and being on an unrestricted diet, I still have to work to get protein in because for 39 years of my life, I didn't eat any protein. So it takes some perseverance to continue to remind myself to eat protein. So you understand what it's like to keep trying again. And then PKU creates the opportunity for innovation and flexibility as we respond to unexpected challenges. I bet most of you on this call have been in some type of situation where you showed up at an event, you thought you were going to have some food available that was going to be accessible, that yourself or the person in your family with PKU could eat, and then there was nothing there, and you had to respond to that in the moment. And yes, it's difficult, but it teaches innovation and flexibility. It teaches that skill of planning ahead, of trying again, trying to get a little bit better next time. And so even though treatment options may change over the course of life, the habits create solid values that create stability in times of change. We learn that skill of getting up and trying again. And when we talk about the PKU diet, it's something that nobody can be perfect at. We need to forgive ourselves and give ourselves some grace to not be perfect all the time. But when we're not perfect, to just get up and start over again the next day. I think the mentality that I was able to adopt was just, you do the best you can as much as you can, and then you keep going when you screw up. You just start over. And PKU is really good at developing that skill in us. And the third thing I want to talk about is self-awareness and individuality. And people with PKU absolutely know what it's like to be the only one eating something different. It's gotten easier since veganism has become popular. I am very, very thankful for vegans. They have made my life about 10 times easier on diet. But sometimes we're the only one not eating meat or not eating protein or not eating the ice cream. And so you learn how to say no when everybody else is saying yes to something. And that can translate into being an independent person. It can translate into not following the crowd, into making choices for the things that are good for you and not basically based on what's popular. And people who change things don't do things the way that everybody else does. And so PKU develops this really cool sense of individuality, that I have something different about me, but it makes me unique. And I've learned that it's okay to be unique and it's okay to be different, and life won't fall apart if I'm a little bit different than everybody else. And I will also say that this was a really hard lesson to learn as a teenager. As I said, I went off diet when I was in my teens because that's not a time of life where that's an easy choice to make. But I got through it. I got through it with bad levels. I talked a little bit about my personal success, and I was still able to accomplish those things even with a couple years off diet. So if you're a parent and if you have a child who's really struggling with diet and really struggling with staying with the things that they need to be healthy, don't be discouraged. There's always an opportunity to start over. A few bad levels are not the end of a person's life. As soon as you get back on track, you can turn things around. Every day is about small choices. And the process of continually having to advocate for oneself can also improve communication and self-advocacy. And that's a skill that does need to be learned, but the more you stand up for yourself, it gets a little bit easier every time. And so you can learn the skill of self-advocacy from PKU. The next skill is planning and preparation. So we all know what it's like to plan for the PKU diet. We all know what it's like to food prep at the beginning of the week. We all know what it's like to calculate out a full day's worth of food. I like to call this one strategic vision, and it's the ability to take the immediate, detail-oriented view and the long view at the same time. And we do this on a daily basis through the daily aspects of diet management. But then we also have this sort of lifelong management and wellness that we're looking towards. We're doing these small things in the day-to-day because we want to live a long, healthy life. And so that gives us strategic vision, and it gives us a sense of clarity about what we're going. And if we can translate that to other aspects of our life, there's a statistic that says that people who write down their goals are more likely to achieve them. And we write down our protein goals every single day. So when we write down our bigger goals that we want to achieve as people with PKU, we understand the process of making those daily choices to get to that goal already. When I was leading my organization, the board of directors used to tell me that I had a unique ability to see the day-to-day while not losing sight of the big picture. And they actually commented to me that they'd had other leaders and executives come in who were good at one or the other. So they were able to either manage the day-to-day really well, or they were visionaries but didn't have a good perspective on the day-to-day. And I know that I learned that through managing PKU. And PKU creates the understanding of importance to attention to detail, because even that little half a cup of broccoli or that little bit extra something can be too much in terms of daily protein intake. So we weigh everything that we eat. We measure all of the things that we eat. We pay a high degree of attention to detail, even if that's not our biggest strength. We know how to do that. So the management of a condition that requires a high degree of conscientiousness creates a foundational life skill. And then the last skill that I want to talk about is empathy and diversity. And PKU creates a unique perspective on life. And we've talked about this a bit already, but we have to live with a difficult condition. Sometimes we feel unwell. We have to learn to advocate for ourselves, but we don't experience intentional discrimination. And this is an advantage, but we also know what it's like to be different. And people often find meaning in difficult situations in life. There's a common saying that says, he who has a why to live for can deal with almost any how. And that was actually in a book called Man's Search for Meaning, about a person who lived through the Holocaust and wrote about the things that he saw and who was able to survive a very difficult situation. And they had a bigger picture in mind. And so PKU really gives an opportunity for people to develop the skill of understanding what other people are going through and appreciating that. And I've always found it interesting that a high percentage of people with PKU that have gone on to adulthood end up working and helping professions as adults. So I know quite a few professionals with PKU who are in some type of teaching profession or nursing profession or working in therapy. I have personal relationships with people with PKU who've gone on to help other people with their lives. And I believe that a lot of that commonality comes from the fact that we deal with a situation that we understand what it's like to be a little bit different and how it feels. And so we want to help other people navigate that as well. So even as I've shared all this, it's really easy to say, well, that's great, but I'm not at that point in my life. I don't see all of these benefits working out. And that's where you need to take the long view. It's where you need to take the big picture view of PKU and where things are going. I think sometimes in the community, we always end up talking so much about medical treatment and diet management and the challenges. And we absolutely need to talk about those things because those are really critical to our well-being. But it also starts with your attitude. And you can always make new choices if PKU management has not been going well. Sometimes it's just a small step in the right direction. For myself personally, I could always tell a pretty significant difference between a Phe level of 2 versus a 4 versus a 7 versus a 10 versus a 13. And my levels have been all over those ranges. And it was always better to get to a 10 than to be at a 13, or multiply that by 60 if you don't use that scale wherever you are. And a 7 always felt a little bit better than a 10, and a 4 always felt a little bit better than a 7. So it's not about perfection, it's about progress. It's just about starting over and making a different choice. Maybe your weakness is ice cream and just you love regular ice cream, and maybe today is just about choosing the non-dairy ice cream instead of regular ice cream. Maybe it's putting aside some regular bread and eating some low-fat vegetables instead of that thing that you normally eat. Maybe it's making a call to your clinic or finding a support group. It is a day-to-day process, and we'll talk a little bit about some of these mindsets, but you can always start over. As I've talked about discipline and resilience, you just start over when you mess up. It's okay not to be perfect. It's okay for your kids not to be perfect. I think sometimes what's not acknowledged is it is impossible to walk through the PKU diet and be 100% perfect all the time. You'd have to be superhuman to do that. So there are going to be times that we mess up. I know there have been probably 100 times where I went somewhere and I thought that the food that I was going to eat was safe, and then I found out that it had eggs in it, or I found out that it had something in it that I didn't expect or plan for, and then I didn't feel great. We can't control everything around us, but we can control our attitudes, and we can control the choices that we make. And it may not always be easy, but we do have options. So I want to talk about now a couple attitudes to adopt. And the first one that's important is to choose hope. Take the long view of life. Like I said earlier, when I was in high school off diet, I did not see myself achieving some of the things that I saw. All I saw was what I was living with in the moment, where I was feeling very moody and irritable and depressed. I never even saw Palynziq as being an option in the future. When you think about how far we come as far as treatment, being on an enzyme therapy that allowed me to eat a normal diet wasn't even something that I'd considered or thought of as a possibility. So we don't know what's ahead of us. We have to choose to be hopeful about it. And with that, it's important to know that your life never has no impact. You always have an impact on the people around you, and your story can always be used to benefit somebody else. Your story might not be one that you get up and share publicly or share on stage, but it may be a lifeline for somebody else when you're able to share the things that PKU helped you with and helped you learn, and how you dealt with and managed some of the struggles with PKU. When I was teaching a leadership class to college juniors and seniors, one of the things that I asked them to think about was what the class dynamic felt like when one person was absent. And it didn't matter who that person was. And pre-quarantine, I know we're not seeing people much right now, but we all have been in groups where the group is different when one regular member is gone. It doesn't matter if it's the loudest person in the group or the person who helps quietly in the background. Dynamics change when you're not participating and when you're not acting. And when I shared that example with this group of students, they all got it. They all understood it. They all knew what it was like when one person was missing from that group. You do have an impact, and focus on that. Focus on the fact that your life does have meaning for somebody else around you. It doesn't have to be big, but it is important. And choose to focus on the benefits instead of the burdens. Like I said earlier, what you focus on will inform your perspective. The second thing is find community, and you're all on this webinar today, so you're already taking a step to doing that. But this diet is hard to do alone. A lot of new parents have asked me, what are things that really helped you growing up? What helped you stay on diet? What helped you stay focused? And what I say is my parents were very involved with PKU from the beginning. I'm fortunate to have a brother and a cousin with PKU, so I had some personal relationships, but my parents were part of the PKU Organization of Illinois from when it was founded. So I went to annual meetings and cookie exchanges and new parent meetups from a very young age. And I know there are people in this country who never met another person with PKU, but now we have Instagram and Facebook, and the pictures I'm sharing are from events I've been to. Everybody in these pictures with me also has PKU. The first picture is from the NPKUA conference in 2018, which was an amazing event. It was the first time I'd been, but it was such a phenomenal experience to be with other adults who understood the PKU experience. And the second picture is with a friend that I actually connected with on Instagram, and we met in person, and it was so great to have dinner with her. I had come from a long work day, and she shared her formula with me, and we ate dinner at a Greek restaurant. And the waiter kept asking us if we wanted something with cheese because we didn't want meat, and we just rolled our eyes and understood what that felt like. So this diet and this condition is it's difficult to do alone. So surround yourself with people. And if you're not in a place where there's a support network, like the PKU Organization of Illinois, find it online. There's so much opportunity to connect with people with PKU online. Don't try to do it alone. And then the last part that is really important is just to acknowledge honestly. And it is okay and it is important to allow PKU to be hard, to feel hard, and to give space for bad days, whether that's you or your child who's having the bad day. And parents, it is okay to have a bad day with PKU sometimes too. I think it wasn't until I was an adult and on my own and had to cook and prepare all my meals for myself that I realized how much work it was to be a caregiver with PKU. So sometimes it's okay to just say it's hard. I think there are times that in the PKU community, we try to be positive all the time. And this whole presentation was about how to be positive with PKU. But if you're always positive, that's also not always honest. You have to understand that it's hard. The food can be expensive. The formula doesn't always taste good. Some days you just don't want to count and track. And so it is hard. Let your kids have hard days. Let yourself have hard days, but don't dwell in them. We are stronger people because we had PKU, so just don't get stuck there. And then for those of you who are support systems for people with PKU, also keep in mind that there are limits to what you know about how PKU feels. What's happening in our minds with PKU is challenging. We don't always know how to tell the difference ourselves between what's just a normal life emotion and what's a PKU symptom. And even being on Palynziq, I've had great levels for 2 years, and I still have days where I'm a little bit moody and I wonder if my Phe level's high. And it's pretty unlikely that it's high because I've not had even close to high levels since being on Palynziq. But I still think back to, wow, is this a normal emotion or is this something I'm dealing with because I ate a little too much or too little of something? And bad days don't mean that you failed. Just get back up again and start over. Keep going. And so all of this, it's all about attitude and it's all about perspective. It's all about just taking it a day at a time and making choices and connecting with people and doing what you need to do to keep moving forward. So I want to end with a couple questions. The first is, what is your biggest challenge with PKU? And then the second is, what can you do differently about that challenge today? And feel free to drop it in the chat box if you'd like. If you want to talk about it during the next 15 minutes of Q&A, feel free to bring it up. Like I said, I'm going to turn my camera on for the Q&A. If you'd like to, you're totally welcome to. If you don't want to have your camera on, that's also perfectly okay. But just think about what small things you can do differently today. And before we move to Q&A, I just want to thank again the PKU Organization of Illinois. I put some information on this particular slide where you can get some more information. The PKU Organization of Illinois has a couple more upcoming webinars, which I think are going to be really great. I'm excited about them. You can find more information on their website. PKU.com is also a BioMarin PKU support page. And then I also have my own website for dealing with PKU. It's not been very active, but it probably will become more active in the coming months. So thank you again for your time. I'm excited to answer any questions you may have. And I'll start my video. And Grant, if you want to either just read the chat questions or unmute participants so they can ask questions directly, I'll let you moderate that.
Sure. So the first question, which is very, very legitimate, is the challenge with PKU and money. And it is something that dealing with, it can be incredibly difficult. PKU food is not cheap. So I don't know how much you know about, the outreach organizations, but if you want to talk to that, if not, I'll interject too.
Yeah, and Grant, if you do want to interject, that's awesome too. A couple options, work with your clinic in your insurance company, first of all, get involved in NPKUA. One of the pieces of legislation that they're very actively working on is the Medical Equity Nutrition Act. And that piece of legislation will require insurance companies to cover medical foods. So that's important that we reach out to our legislators and keep working on that so that that cost is not a barrier. A couple other things, sometimes clinics do have patient programs for financial support. The National Organization for Rare Disorders sometimes can help with costs.
And that's NORD. If you ever hear the term NORD, that's what National Organization of Rare Disorders means. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there have been times in my life where I was just doing the best I could with what I could find at the grocery store. It does involve cooking too. Sometimes foods from places like Cambric are more expensive than, buying the low protein bread mix and making it from scratch. Wheat starts really cheap on Amazon. Getting involved in local communities on Facebook is also helpful because then people can share ideas of where to find products more cheaply or substitutes that you can use. I think there's like an Asian rice noodle that's pretty low fee or almost free fee. If you have an ethnic grocery store, you might be able to find that. Grant, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
There is, Cook County has one as well as the state of Illinois. You have to qualify, and the income range is relatively low. But it's worth talking to your clinic, whoever your social worker is in the clinic, be it Sue or the other ones, depending on where you go, to UIC or Lurie or downstate or in the state you're in. Reach out. And I know NORD has done a ton. And even PKU Illinois has money set aside for those who qualify. You need to go through your clinic, but we're giving out $200 stipends to people who need to get food. But it has to be approved by the clinic. We just don't give it to anyone who calls. So work with those people. And we do have money set aside for just that, especially now with the unemployment being the way it is and the way our lifestyles have been impacted by what's going on today. But that money doesn't really ever go away. We always have some for people. So here's a question, and it went through so quickly I lost it, so hang on a sec. Prior to being on Palynziq, Sarah, how did you incorporate variety into your diet and keep from getting bored of repeated foods?
So if you found this webinar through my Instagram account, you'll see a lot of what I eat. If you scroll down, I actually started my Instagram account in 2015. It's prosperous_PKU because I was struggling with what to eat and dietary choices, and I wanted to eat a healthy whole foods diet. And so I started posting pictures of the things that I ate, and I actually found it a really important way to stay accountable. But a lot of it was just experimenting with different fruits and vegetables and different combinations and trying to get as much as I could at the grocery store and then supplementing with low protein foods. Nutrition has actually been posting some recipes over the past year or so that I created for them. So it's a lot of just experimenting and choosing to be creative. I think that vegetables generally all go well together, so you can't really go wrong. There's some other great Instagram accounts that showcase PKU food. I follow vegan food bloggers and modify recipes. I live in Chicago, so there's lots of different ethnic food options, and so experimenting with foods from other cultures added a lot of variety. I tried things like cassava root and yuca, which were really great low protein and cheap substitutes for
and cassava flour is a great way to
yes.
Great baking item.
Yeah, and cassava, actually, it's about $1 at the grocery store. If you buy the fries from Cambric, they're like $7 or $8. but you can buy a cassava root at the grocery store. It makes like two servings and it's $1 and it tastes amazing. So just experimenting with different types of fruits and vegetables and putting things together was the big way that I would deal with that. But I'd say follow people on Instagram. I think that's the most amazing way to come up with foods ideas because people are so creative. I've seen like low protein key lime pies made from Rice Krispie treats and just some really incredible things.
So just to add to that, you have to want to cook. That is really
Yes.
important.
Yes.
My wife loves to cook. So we have 4 kids, one with PKU. My wife's a vegetarian. So you can see our table gets crowded pretty quickly. And we have 4 birthdays. Well, 6, I guess, if you count me and her. And she makes low protein cakes for every single one of them. And no one can tell the difference anymore. It's a lot of practice and you will get better. I think the Cook for Love website has a ton of stuff to look at as well. And I know a lot of people aren't on Facebook for a myriad of reasons, but if you want to set up an account on Facebook just to follow PKU people, it would probably be worth your time. It doesn't need to be a big social event where you're talking to your friends and learning about what their likes and dislikes are, but there is a lot on there to go through. One person asked, can you talk about your experience with Palynziq? How it's been so far, what you're doing, how's the routine? Do you still do blood draws? Do you still take formula? All of that. Can you talk about how Palynziq is going for you right now?
I'll talk about it briefly. I would say if you want to learn more about Palynziq, and maybe Michelle can put in the comments where you can sign up for an event. BioMarin does pretty regular events, virtual events now, to teach people about Palynziq and get into detail with all of those questions. But it was, for me, a pretty easy, good transition. Everybody's experience is different. I did deal with some side effects. I was able to manage them with my clinic. I personally responded in about 4 months. I currently eat about 70 to 80 grams of protein on a daily basis, and I do not take any formula. So really, and my dose is every other day. So I take an injection every other day, and then I take regular blood levels. Mine have been in good control since I responded to Palynziq. And the good levels have been the biggest benefit, not dealing with the high Phe symptoms. But if you want more detailed information, join a BioMarin event or talk to your clinic, and they can answer some of those questions more thoroughly.
All right, there's no other questions that I see. I'll give it another minute. But I'm gonna actually, if you could stop your share, I have one more slide to give up.
Let's see. There we go.
And Michelle actually put in the chat the community events that BioMarin is having, so you can look in the chat and find that. So I'm going to share this. So there's more events coming that Sarah just said, and this is the next one. It's PKU Research Updates, and it's in 2 Saturdays. It's sponsored by VitaFlow. If you don't know who Dr. Burton is, she is one of the leading experts on PKU in the world, as far as I know, and was the Lurie Children's genetics head for almost 20 years. She just retired, but she's still very active in the community. And if you want to see more, let me just escape here. And you can see can you see our website, Sarah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so this is pkuil.org. If you go to news and events, here are all the events that we have coming up. If you're a new parent and like to know, anyone under 3 years old can qualify for New Parent Cafe. And as you've been in here, there's people from other states. You feel free to share these events. You will be getting emails since you registered for this to the other ones. We would love to have you on. PKU Research Updates is a great topic. Barbara is a fantastic speaker, as well as the one at the end of October with Dr. Sean Chris talking about PKU and the brain. It is his specialty. So those are the events we have coming up. If they keep getting as well attended as these ones, we will probably have more in 2021. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Sarah, before we sign off?
No, thank you all for attending. I appreciate your time. I know there's a lot of things competing for everybody's interest right now with quarantine. So thanks for taking the time, and I hope that we can connect again soon. We
have recorded this, and when it's finished converting, we will put it on our YouTube page and our website. You can share with anyone. We'll also email all the recordings to people, so they can, you can share this with friends if you want to. There's one more chat that came up. Okay, this is it. So Sarah, we really, really appreciate your time. It was a fantastic conversation, and thanks to everyone who signed up and everyone who attended. Have a great rest of the day.
Sounds good. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great Saturday.
Bye-bye.